Welcome to the future of Israel and the Jewish people. If you've never been on this show before, it's very exciting. What's exciting about it? We're studying God's Word given to the Hebrew people. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever read Scripture? Well, we're not going to preach you. We're not going to teach you, really. We're just going to read some Scripture together, ask you to research it, get out your Hebrew Scriptures. If you're a Gentile, you would refer to it as the Old Testament. We always tell you that doesn't mean everything is obsolete, just means that one preceded the other. So let's read. We left off last show with Jacob. He ran away from his brother who wanted to kill him. Why did he want to kill him? Because he stole his birthright. Why did he do that? Because his mother told him to do it. Okay? So he went to his uncle's house. He made a deal with his uncle, worked 7 years for his beautiful young daughter. But after the party was over and he went in the tent in the dark with the bride, turned out to be her older sister. The uncle said, spend the honeymoon with her, and then I'll give you the one you wanted. But you have to work another 7 years. So that's where we're going to take off. Pull out chapter 29 of Genesis. And we probably should read along with me. Well, let's skip over to 30. I think 30 would be better. And we need to understand that what's happening here is that these two sisters now are going to be both his wives. Neither one is going to be like a concubine, okay? So, what can I tell you about that? It's a very tough situation for a man to try to be committed to more than one person fully, okay? But that's what happens. So, his uncle makes a deal and says, you work 7 years. So he has two wives now, and each one of them has, like, I guess you'd say, a servant girl, okay? And so the servant girl is supposed to be sort of a maid, or as we use in the Bible sometimes, an armor bearer, somebody that carries the load for someone else. And it is a very important situation that he's in. Remember now, he was called by God, and he was supposed to be the heir, and he is. But because his brother's anger towards him, he forced to run away from him. And now he's working with his uncle. And 7 years for each woman is a long time. It's 14 years given. Most people don't even stay on a job in today's society that long. But that's the way it is, okay? So what goes on here, and I could read a lot of this, Leah, who was not his choice, becomes very fruitful, and she begins to have one son after another. And as she's having these children, she's also naming them based on what she is feeling inside. Now, feelings can get us in trouble lots of times. So, what am I telling you that for? Well, if you follow your feelings lots of times, it'll be very selfish. So, she has about 4 children. And what really happens here is that the one he loves again is childless. You know, and I don't know how it is for a woman to be without children and be married, but in the Bible, it's very upsetting to them. And why is it very upsetting to them is because they saw it as a disgrace. They saw it like there's something wrong with you. And so she doesn't know what to do about it. And she thinks, well, I've got to have children somehow or another. And she does very much what they did in those days. They gave somebody that was submitted to them to be like a surrogate mother and bring forth children. And that's what she begins to do. So we have this competitive program going on, okay? And Leah doesn't want to lose any ground. She begins to give her servant girl to Jacob. And now he's got children with Leah. He doesn't have any with Rachel, but he has it with Rachel's servant. And now he has children with Leah's. And she is still distressed, his real bride, because she has no children. So one day, Leah's son is doing something with mandarin, which is supposed to be a fertility plant. And whether it really has any natural tendencies to help fertilization or not, I don't know. Health food store might tell you that. But she wants this, hoping that it will help her. And this situation gets so desperate that she says, give me some of that, to her nephew. And her sister says, you stole my husband. Now you're trying to steal my son's mandarin. And the reason she said that, even though she's had a lasting relationship with Jacob, is that she knows she's not loved the way Rachel is, even without children. And she says, well, if you allow Jacob to sleep with me tonight, my son will give you the mandarin. So she goes out and meets Jacob in the field and says, you're going to sleep with me tonight. And she begins to have children again. So, by the grace of God, mandarin and no mandarin, Rachel eventually begins to have children. Now, if we read all of this text, which I'm not sure we have time to do, we find out all the different names in the firstborn and what they were. Reuben was the firstborn. There was Simeon and Laban, and there was Judah. And what's important about Judah is that's where the word Jew comes from, because it's the line of Judah which David comes through, and it's also the one the Messiah comes through. Okay? So, it's very interesting. But Rachel has Joseph, and she's been relieved of her distress, and she's been relieved of her shame. And she eventually has another son. And that son is Benjamin, which plays an important part in the end of Genesis. So we have all of these children now. And what is happening to Jacob in the meantime? Well, he's working off his diary. And after he works off his diary and pays back his uncle realizes that he's blessed. And so he says to him, well, you know, I want you to stick around. You've been prospering me. But he's feeling guilty about that. And so he says to him, well, it isn't fair for me again to take advantage of you. So he's trying to be the good guy, so to speak. And he says, how should I pay you? So what he says to his uncle, well, let's make this deal. We'll separate the animals based on color schemes. And if I wind up with any of the sheep that are the kind of colors that yours are, well, then I stole it. And, you know, I'm guilty of taking from you. But if I only have the colors that we designate for me, then I have been honest with you. And Jacob, through this ordeal, is beginning to allow the Lord to make him hardworking, honest, family man, and a very good herdsman. So he says to him, let's separate the sheep. So he does. But unbeknownst to his uncle, God is working in his life. And what he's doing is he's bringing him to the place where he's going to really prosper him. Okay? How does he do it? Well, in a dream, he tells him that when the animals come to the water hole, put these sticks that are stripped of their bark, so to speak, in front of them. And when they're drinking water, they're going to see those sticks, you know. And when they produce, they're going to produce sheep the color that you need. So what happens is the sheep begin to produce more of the colors that Jacob's sheep are designated than the sheep that are the uncle's. And then if he sees sheep coming up to the water trough and they're sickly or elderly and they wouldn't produce good lambs, he doesn't do it to them because he doesn't want them to reproduce his color. He lets them reproduce the uncle's color. And through this tremendous scheme, he becomes extremely rich with sheep. And so he has this tremendous herd now. And but he realizes now that jealousy has come into the play. And what's happening is the uncle is jealous. His cousins, I guess, are saying, Jacob's getting rich and we're getting poorer. He's one man with 3 or 4 men. His sheep are growing, ours aren't. We're becoming poorer, he's becoming rich. Okay? So at this point, Jacob realizes he's got to get out of there. And so the story then, as we move on to Genesis 31, if you turn your pages to that, Jacob hears that Laban's son was saying, Jacob has taken everything our father owned and has gained all the wealth that was belonging to our father. And Jacob noticed that Laban's attitude towards him was not what it had been. Then the Lord said to Jacob, go back to the land of your father and to your relatives, and I will be with you. Here's the important issue. Don't listen to what your mother tells you. Listen to what God the Father tells you. Okay? So Jacob sends word to Rachel and Leah to come out into the field where his flocks were. And he said to them, see that your father's attitude towards me is not what it was before. But God of my father has been with me. You know that I've worked for your father with all my strength. 7. So we know he worked 7 years for one, 7 for the other, and now he's working for his herd. I guess another 7. 7's a perfect number, by the way. Yet your father has cheated me by changing the wages 10 times. However, God has not allowed him to honor me. Well, I'm sorry, to harm me. And this happens in business a lot. If it's happened to you, you might identify with this. You know, you're a great salesman, you got a great commission, you make over $100,000, and suddenly you're making more than your boss because he's on salary and you're on commission. So they change it again, and they change it again, and they keep trying to get you to come down to a certain salary, rather than wishing that you would make $1 million in commission, because that would mean they made $100 million in sales. They don't see it that way. Small-minded people, okay? So he goes on and he says, the speckled ones will be your wages. Then all the flocks gave birth to speckled youngs. And he said, the straight ones will be your wages. Then all the flock bore straight young. So God has taken away your father's livestock and has given them to me. You see, a righteous God is eventually going to make things right. In a brief season, I once had a dream that in which I looked up and saw that the male goats mated with the flock were speckled or spotted. The angel of God said to me in the dream, Jacob, I answered, here I am. And he said, look up and see that all the male goats mate with the flocks are straight and speckled and spotted. For I have seen all that Laman has done to you. Wow, that's powerful. You see why the nation of Israel is being formed under this man. And God, from its conception, is beginning to prosper him. So, I am the God of Bethel, when you anointed a pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now leave this land at once and go back to your native land. Then Rebekah and Leah replied, do we still have any share in the inheritance of our father's estate? They're saying there's nothing here for us, okay? Doesn't he not regard us as foreigners, okay? Had 2 beautiful daughters, and he's not treating them right. Not only has he sold us, but he has used us. Well, he did sell them. He sold them to Jacob for 7 years each, okay? How do you feel about that? Okay? But he has used up what we paid for us. So, even though the great prosperity that God gave him during the time of his working for his uncle used it up. Okay? He didn't save it, he didn't invest it. Surely all the wealth that God took away from our father belongs to us and our children. So do whatever God has told you. They're beginning to understand the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They're beginning to see that if God passed it to us, we shouldn't feel guilty. He's blessing us as a family. Let's move on. Okay? Sometimes we wait too long to move out of a situation. Well, then Jacob put his children and his wives on camels, and he drove all the livestock ahead of him, along with all the goods that he had acquired in Padan Aram, and going to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. So he's returning back to Dad. When Laban had gone to shear his sheep, Rachel stole the father's household god. Well, Rachel still's got a little bit of problem, okay? She still needs a good luck charm. She still believes in an idol, so to speak. We don't see this with Leah. And my take on it is maybe Jacob was only sparing Leah, but he was attracted to beauty rather than to a godly woman, to a woman with a good heart. And he allowed the outside appearance to steal his heart. And we'll see more of this in the future. Moreover, Jacob deceived Laban in armament, but not telling him he was running away. So he fled with all he had across the Euphrates River. Remember what I said before, where this place was. The Euphrates River runs right up this valley, and I believe he was probably west of the Euphrates, but Babel, which became Babylon, was between the Euphrates and the Tigris River. And they headed for the hill country of Gilead. Okay, now on the third day, here we go with third day again, always comes up, right? Laban was told that Jacob had fled, taking his relatives with him. He pursued Jacob for 7 days and caught up with him in the hill country. Okay? Then God came to Laban. Okay, this is interesting. In a dream at night, and said to him, "Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. Jacob has pitched his tent in the hill country." Okay? And I guess his uncle overtook him, and he came now more or less with a small army of relatives, and they camped also. Then Laban said to Jacob, "Why have you done? You have deceived me." Here we go with that word again. "And you carried off my daughters like captives in war." Well, you know, that's what they did in those days. They captured women, used them as slaves. Okay? So he sold them, but now he's saying Jacob, taking his own wives, had captured them. They went on their own accord, remember? "Why did you run away secretly and deceive me?" That word again. The very people who do things like rob and steal accuse us of robbing and stealing. "Why didn't you tell me so I could have sent you away with joy and singing?" Okay? Singing to music and the tambourine and the harp. "You didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren and my daughter goodbye. You have done a foolish thing. I have the power to harm you." Interesting. Okay? "But last night, the God of your fathers said to me, 'Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad.' Now you have gone off because you long to return to your father's household. But why did you steal my gods?" Well, here's the thing that Rachel took, remember? Jacob answered Laban, "I'm afraid because I thought you would take your daughters away from me by force. But if you find anyone who has your God, that person should not live." Wow. Be careful again what you say. He doesn't realize his favorite wife has the God. Okay? And so what happens here is Laban, his uncle, goes through everything looking for it. So he went into Jacob's tent and into Leah's tent and into the tent of the 2 female servants, but he found nothing. After he came out of Leah's tent, he enters Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the household god out of, but she put it in a camel's saddle and was sitting on them. Laman searched through everything in the tent, but found nothing. Rachel says to her father, "Don't be angry, my lord, that I cannot stand up in your presence," which was a sign of respect. "I haven't my period." So well, that was the thing, that you weren't allowed to be near a woman in that time of a month. So he searched, but couldn't find the household gods. Jacob was angry and took Laman to task. So what happens is, he now says, "You didn't find it? Now you accuse me again. What is my crime?" he said. Laman said, "How have I wronged you that you hunt me down?" Well, he did hunt him down. "Now that you have searched through all the goods, why haven't you found that belongs to your household? Put it in front of me and your relatives and mine, and let them judge between the two of us." So he's asking for a court of order here. You accuse me, I want to see the proof. I have been with you for 20 years now. Your sheep and your goats have not miscarried, nor have I eaten a ram from your flock. Well, that's really interesting. Well, I don't think we can continue any further tonight, but read the rest of the story. It's wonderful. You want to talk to us? Email us on info@thefutureofisrael.org, or watch a previous show on www.thefutureofisrael.org. Have a good week. Enjoy yourself. Read your scriptures. Be back with us next week. And shalom.